Journals of the West by Tracy E. Dills. Early in United States history, a team of 33 people did what had never been done before. They crossed North America from the East Coast to the West Coast. It took them close to 3 years. The explorers traveled on foot, by boat, on horseback. Before starting out, they spent 2 years making preliminary plans. They officially left from St. Louis, Missouri in May of 1804 and arrived in what is now Oregon in December 1805. Along the way, they faced blizzards. They faced wide, rushing rivers. They faced hunger. And they found their way with the help of Sacagawea, a member of the Native American Shoshone tribe. Sacagawea and other Native Americans helped the explorers of the West. Sacagawea. Explorers of the West used pen and ink to write in journals. Pen. Ink. Today, we know the details of their journey. We know what they ate. We know what dangers they faced. And we know what they saw. How do we know? Meriwether Lewis and his partner William Clark were leaders of the journey. They wrote in journals that tell us about their trip. We know most of the details from Meriwether Lewis's journals. The journals tell not only what happened, they also tell us how the explorers felt about what they saw. It's almost as if Lewis and Clark were talking to us. Their journals make history come alive. There are many reasons to keep a diary or a journal. At the time Lewis and Clark made their journey, many people kept journals. One of the reasons was so other travelers would know what to expect. The journals told about where there were wild animals for food. They also included maps. The journals also explained the plants and animals explorers found on their way. In fact, the Lewis and Clark Journal tells of discovering over 200 kinds of plants and animals. The prairie dog was among the animals Lewis and Clark discovered. Prairie dog. Lewis wrote about the fast currents and other dangers of river rapids. Rapids. The journals warned travelers of danger, too. The dangers in Lewis's journals were raging rivers or high cliffs. Lewis also wrote about where he had come across bad snowstorms. He told how the team found shelter from the brutal storms. Some Native Americans felt that the explorers were their opponents. The journals tell which of these tribes caused problems. Lewis wrote about how the Native Americans stole horses and weapons. After Lewis and Clark completed their journey, more people headed from the eastern to the western part of North America. These pioneers often followed the Oregon Trail. This trail wound through Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, and North Dakota. It went across the wide, sweeping prairies. Many of these pioneers were families. Typically, they packed their horse-drawn wagons full of everything they owned. Then they went in search of a new home. A map of the Oregon Trail. Travel by wagon was dangerous. These pioneers were not always aware of the obvious dangers. Their journals tell of how hard the trips were. They faced hunger. They could not always find water. Some were injured when they fell off wagons. Many pioneers died of disease or accidents. In 1852, the pioneer Kate Dunlap wrote in her journal about people who had lost their lives on the trail. She wrote, "Oh, how many have laid down in death on these plains." Mothers often wrote in journals about how hard the trip was on their children. Pioneer Juliette Breyer wrote about 2 days when her family went without water. Her sons bore up bravely. She writes about how her oldest son kept the family going. He told his brothers about the great things they would eat and drink at the end of the trip. This, she wrote, kept them all alive. A family of pioneers. Many visitors to the West write about its beautiful mountain views. Others spoke of the wonders of the trip. Molly Sheehan, a young member of one pioneer family, talked of gorgeous sunsets on distant mountain peaks. Pioneer Lucerna Parsons wrote about a stone cliff called Chimney Rock in Nebraska. I was struck, she wrote, with amazement. Lucerna Parsons also noted in her journal that travelers had carved their names into the rock. Gold was discovered in California in 1848, and many more people headed west. Supposedly, there was a fortune to be made. When people heard these stories about getting rich, they headed to the West Coast. They wrote in their journals about what they hoped to find. The promise of a land of gold helped them face the long journey. Pioneers used pans like this one to separate pieces of gold from the gravel found in streams. Gold. Gravel. Digging for gold was difficult work. Many of them were disappointed, probably even embarrassed. Elisha Douglas Perkins wrote, "'Tis terrible, and such a backache." He later writes in his journal about how hard it was to give up the search. He went back home with no gold. His journal tells us that it took too much time and hard work. Many of those who headed west drew what they saw in their journals. Granville Stewart and his brother searched for gold in Montana. His journal shows many sketches of the hills and plains of Montana. He also drew maps. His journal gives us a good idea of what the West looked like during the 1800s. Stewart used what he had written and sketched to write a book. The book helped other travelers. It showed which trails were the best. It also talked about how to get along with the Native Americans. Pioneer Granville Stewart made sketches of mountains like those shown in this color photograph. Keep a journal and express yourself. People today write journals for the same reasons as people in the past. They use them to keep track of places they have visited. They use them so they can remember special trips. You may have created a journal of a special vacation with your family. Like the pioneers, people today also write in journals and diaries to talk about their feelings. They write about problems and about things that make them happy. Writing in journals helps people put their thoughts into words. You may have a diary or a journal where you can express what you feel. Today, some people write in their journals by hand. Other people decide to keep their diary on a computer. This digital diary can include photos, video, and recorded messages. It's not only a way to express feelings, it's also a way to create history. It's a way for us to tell people who will live 50 or 100 years from now how we live. Many people keep digital diaries created on a computer. Responding. Target vocabulary. Word builder. Make a word web around the word brutal. Use the web to describe other words that mean brutal. Write about it. Text to self. Imagine that you are a pioneer heading out west in the 1800s. Write a journal entry about what a typical day might be like. Target strategy. Brutal. Embarrassed. Gorgeous. Obvious. Officially. Opponents. Preliminary. Supposedly. Sweeping. Typically. Target strategy. Visualize. Use text details to form pictures in your mind of what you are reading. Word teaser. Which vocabulary word has a catch in the middle?